shop works. We're going to do something a little bit different on the channel today. Instead of one of my projects, we're going to focus in on one of my dad's projects that's actually been in the shop for a long time. It's an F-250, 1965 F-250 4x4 that he's had for probably about 2 years now. Right, Dad? 3 years now. Anyway, it's been tied up in my shop for about 2 years. And a lot of the space in my shop is dedicated to his truck right now. Well, I've actually wanted to put this on the channel for a while. You guys have probably seen it in the background, and I really haven't talked about it. But today, me and my dad are going to go through pretty much how this truck was gotten and what's been done to the truck and where the truck sits now, and kind of show you guys one of the other projects that's been in here for a long time that you've been seeing. Anyway, I'd like to introduce my dad. This is Mike, my dad, and back here behind us you can see all the truck sitting in pieces and parts and stuff like that. And, Dad, you want to take a little bit of time to tell them like how you acquired the truck?
About 5 years ago, I had a 74 Ford F-250 Highboy that I was working on. I picked it up out of some guy's yard for like 1,500 bucks. It was a perfect truck that just fit me. And I called it Hope because it was kind of a rusty green truck, but it was perfect for me. Put about $5 grand into it. Had the motor rebuilt, did the interior, left the outside because I wanted that perfect patina on it.
It did have a good patina.
And my daughter wanted me to leave it at her house because she lived alone and she wanted a vehicle there to show that, you know, kind of somebody was there and there was people there without having vehicles around. Well, kind of make a long story short, the truck got stolen. They broke in to my daughter's house, robbed her of her personal things. They broke into my truck, hot-wired it, stole it. I never saw my truck again.
I spent a year trying to find that truck.
Yeah.
Actually.
And had everybody looking for it. In fact, one of my hunting buddies was a sheriff's deputy that they actually, all the sheriffs in Thurston County were looking for it and they still couldn't find it. So anyway, sad story, kind of moping around for 3 or 4 months, and I happened to be looking on the internet on Craigslist and found this truck over in Eastern Washington. So I thought, well, I'll go over and look at it. I mean, it looks pretty interesting. It was sitting on the back of a trailer. I thought, well, why not?
I didn't even know you were looking for a project at the time. I knew you were looking at toys, but not another truck.
Yeah, everybody was. And I just, as a fluke, me and a buddy of mine went over and looked at it, and the guy wanted, you know, like $3 grand for it. We, you know, talked him down to about $2 grand, and so we loaded it up on a truck and a trailer and brought it home. And it's the 65 Ford F-250 4-wheel drive. It was a Montana Department of Transportation truck. Actually had a plow on it, and I actually have the flyer from the original manufacturer on the plow attachment for it, which is pretty interesting.
It had a plow attachment on the front?
Plow attachment.
Really?
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah. So I drove it, I fixed it up, you know, rebuilt the engine, put a new engine in it, did a bunch of other work to it just to get it going, fix some brakes, but it still wasn't good enough.
Okay, yeah, well, because let's talk about the first day that you showed up with it.
Oh, yeah.
On a trailer. He pulls it off the trailer. It's got old bias plies on it.
Bias ply.
Like original style bias plies.
Split rim.
It's got holes in the bed. The
Yep.
truck looked rough.
Oh,
like it was multicolored.
Yes.
But it had the yellow on it, and originally we didn't know it was like a forestry truck, pretty much. We didn't know.
Didn't know that.
Because Dad told me it was an F-250 from '65, but if anybody has looked up F-250s, like the first year of F-250 4x4s, they didn't come out with an F-250 4x4 for the consumer till '66. And so it was, you know, they had F-150 or F-100 4x4s before then, but the F-250 4x4, it was like kind of a unicorn, as you couldn't find too much stuff on them. I think they actually only made like under 1,000 of those trucks. Yeah. And what's funny is how rare those trucks are in the U.S. They're actually really common around here. I've actually seen probably about 4 or 5 of them, some with the step side, some with the style side bed.
Right.
but they're all forestry trucks. You can see like the old yellow underneath.
Yellow underneath them. Yep.
You know, so it was cool to get, you know, find out a little bit of the history on the truck, but it was this, you know, it was probably sold to either the forestry or fish and wildlife or like the fire departments or utilities over in Montana. And then it was originally a Montana utility truck, you know, and so anyway, he pulls up, he's got this thing on a flatbed. It ran, right? It ran when you showed up.
It ran.
So it was a running truck that you got for like $2,500.
$2,500.
You know, and it looked a little funky, but I didn't know why it looked funky. You know, because it was an older truck, but it didn't. But something was weird about it, and we didn't notice what was weird about it until later on. But we'll talk about that. But so anyway, he pulls this thing off, fires it up, and I think you took Sarah in it first.
Took Sarah on a ride.
And she was scared shitless.
Yes.
And like so, no power steering.
Nope.
No power brakes.
No.
You know, and I think the brakes were the scariest thing about the truck when you first got it off.
I think only the left front brake was actually working. none of the other brakes were stopping the truck. So when you stomped on the brakes, you'd actually have to turn the wheel left because it would pull right.
Right.
I mean, let's say it would jerk right, and then you'd have to jerk left to keep going straight.
And you had to stomp on the brakes.
You did.
You had to stand on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was pretty scary.
So anyway, you show up with the truck, and what did we do? What did we decide to do with it first? And we immediately brought it in the shop. And were you planning on rebuilding the motor right away, or?
Right away. Yeah.
So we knew we were going to rebuild the engine.
Yeah, because it was the original. It was the original Ford 352 with a 2-barrel.
Right.
But it was a little weak, and it didn't have much. And it kind of smoked a little bit, but it ran, which was a bonus.
Yeah.
So,
it did run, but it did run a little chuggy.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Yeah.
And probably mostly because of the 2-barrel and because the engine was just tired.
Engine was tired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it shifted good at ground gears. I remember getting it through gears was a.
Yeah, from second to third at ground to ground second and third. Which,
right.
Yeah, later we'll explain on that one why. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but the plan was when you first got the truck was to pretty much get it in working condition to take it hunting.
Exactly.
It was going to be a hunting truck. It was going to be a work truck and a toy from the very beginning. But you had, what we had, was it 3 months or something like that? 4 months to get the truck ready before you had to go hunting?
Yeah. We got it in summer in July, and hunting season was in November. Right.
So anyway, the truck came into my shop, and immediately it just started getting torn to shreds, torn apart.
Oh, yeah.
So the motor came out, and what did we do with the engine? What did you do with the engine?
So I took the engine down to a builder that I knew, and
this is the same guy that built the Jeep motor.
Same guy that built the Jeep motor.
And that rebuilt the 360 we put in the 76, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the 76 F-250.
Yeah, the 74. Yep.
It was 74?
Yep.
I thought it was 76.
No, 74.
All right.
Yeah, Hulk was a 74 F-250 highway.
It had square headlights, didn't it?
Nope, had round headlights.
Did it?
Yep.
Man, I like that truck.
I know it.
Anyway, so keep going. So the motor.
Took it down there, took the motor down. He hot tanked it, brought it back out, and said, "Yeah, this block shot," because they had sleeved one of the cylinders, and he didn't want to rebuild it. So to kind of keep in line with the truck, I didn't want to put a different style motor into it. So I wanted the same 352. Well, he just happened to find a 352 block hanging around, so we rebuilt that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that the motor was bad and couldn't be rebuilt.
Yeah, motor been sleeved.
Wow.
Yeah. So so we got another block, rebuilt the motor, and you know, put another $3,000 into it, you know, with all the bells and whistles on it. So it was board, line board, you know, the crank ground polished, you know, new pistons, new rods, the whole 9 yards. Top end was all done with the heads, new valves, valve springs, guides.
So the full long block.
It was a full long block rebuild,
right.
And actually built it so the compression is 9.5 to 1 with the cam that's in it right now. It's kind of an RV cam, because I wanted it a little bit for torque and not too much for horsepower. Still maintain enough vacuum that I could run vacuum power brakes.
That's a flat tappet cam in there, isn't it?
It's a flat tappet.
Yeah.
So
That's like the Jeep. I think the Jeep has a flat tappet cam in there, and I keep forgetting I need to add the zinc additive.
Yeah.
To
So
the oil.
you got to add that
Yeah, or else you'll
wear resistance.
you'll mess up the cam.
Yep. Otherwise, you'll flatten your cam lobes out. So did that, brought it back, put it in, ran it around for about a year, and did miscellaneous things to it. Fixed the brakes.
Pulled Sarah out of a ditch.
Yeah, pulled Sarah out of a ditch. Burned up my clutch.
With it in park. It was in park.
Yeah, burnt the clutch up. That roasted that thing.
Yeah, I haven't fried that clutch.
Some of the problems that in tearing it down, and I don't know if when we go into it, if you'll be able to see, but some of the problems that we tore down is the front and rear drive line were reversed. So so the rear drive line was in the front, the front drive line was in the rear.
So I actually have a picture of before that. Before we got the axle back where it should be.
Oh yeah.
And so when I said at the beginning that there was something that looked a little weird about this truck, it was because where the bed was and where the fender wells were, the tires didn't line up.
Didn't line up.
It looked strange.
They were not centered in the fender wells.
Yeah. And so when Dad started, you drove the truck around like that for a while.
Yeah. For almost a year.
Yeah, you drove it around for a year. He did. He missed the hunting trip with the truck
because of an electrical issue.
Yeah, because of an electrical issue. So the truck didn't make the hunting trip, but it was back together and on the road after that.
Yeah.
So anyway, it looked a little funky, and that's when Dad knew that he was going to rip the truck all the way down. He had made the decision he was going to break the truck all the way down and completely rebuild the truck from the ground up, pretty much, and put it back on the road the way it should be.
Right.
So he got all the manuals and everything like that, started ripping it apart, and was it when we were ripping it down that you noticed that there was something going on with the rear end, or was it when you started putting it back together?
Started putting it back together.
Okay, so
yes.
We get everything. You rebuilt the axles first.
Rebuilt the axles.
Yeah, sent the frame out for powder coat.
Yep.
Or for not for powder coat, but sandblast.
Sandblasted it. Yeah, painted it with 3 coats of epoxy.
Right. So the frame's been epoxied. And you spent a lot of time welding up all the holes.
All the holes.
And I think it was actually before you painted it. It was when you were welding it up and putting stuff back together that we realized that something was going on.
And starting to pre-fit, actually before
the drive lines.
Before painting it, yeah, we were redoing the drive lines and pre-fitting the axle underneath the truck. And that's when we noticed that the bump stop didn't line up with the axle. So the bump stop's here on the frame, the axle's here, and it's like something's weird there. And so when we got to investigating and looking. Montana Department of Transportation, in their great wisdom and their mechanics over there, sorry guys from Montana, but they put on whatever hung around in the shop. So they put on new springs, overloads, and didn't realize that the springs that they put on there were longer and offset than the ones that were original. So the axle was actually set 1.5 inches back from center line.
So they had the shackles flipped too.
Yeah.
They were back.
Oh, and the shackles were actually upside down.
Oh,
so
yeah.
The springs were, everything was upside down and long, and so it took a month of scratching our heads looking at it to figure it out.
Well, didn't they have the front drive shaft on the back and the back drive shaft on the front?
Yeah.
So that made it even worse that they didn't notice was they actually, one of the drive shafts, when they rinky-dinkly put the rear end back together, that the front drive shaft actually fit the rear.
It did.
Because it was longer, and they had it all set back.
Yeah.
You know?
Pretty much where the transfer case sits, because the truck has a divorce transfer case. So it is sitting almost, the transfer case is sitting almost in the middle of the frame. So the distance between the front differential and rear differential is almost exact.
Right.
So it just, I mean, there's like maybe 1 inch difference. So when they swapped everything around, it's like, oh, well, it all fits. This is great. So they made it work. Yeah.
Okay, so there were other things we found too. There were bolts welded to the frame, and I'm not talking about bolts like welded in. I'm talking about like, hey, there's a loose bolt on the floor. Let's weld it to the frame.
Oh yeah.
So they were both welded to the frame.
That did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, there was a crazy. The hitch was welded to the frame.
Hitch was welded to the frame.
Welded to the frame. They used rebar in spots.
Yeah.
So there was some definite weirdness going on. Some farm riggery that was going on with this truck.
Yeah, I was amazed the truck even went down the road and stayed together.
Right.
And pulling this thing apart, I didn't realize just how dangerous this truck actually was until I started pulling everything out and going, oh my gosh.
Now, we had a lot of problems trying to find parts for the truck.
Yeah.
So that was the thing about them building an F-250 in 65, a 4x4, where you couldn't find parts for anything 65 F-250 4x4.
No, you could find pre-64 or post-65, but nothing that is in the 65 realm.
And what's crazy is a lot of the stuff in 66 will fit the truck because pretty much it was an early release of a 66.
Right.
Is what it was.
Yep.
So they wanted the trucks early, and then I think when Ford started building them, they just went ahead and released them in 66 and started building the F-250.
Yeah.
So, like the bumper mounts, I still don't think we have bumper mounts for the truck.
No, front bumper mounts you can't find.
Yeah, yeah. So they just don't exist in any manual.
No, and I've tried, LMC, numerous other, pony parts, anything that's Ford related, trying to find anything that I can use for the truck. Just come down to the fact that, all right, I'm just going to have to
reuse some
fab.
parts.
I'm just going to have to actually fab mounts and a bumper for the truck.
Like we still haven't found rear springs.
No.
Yeah, we can't find anybody that makes rear springs for that year truck,
Nope.
F-250.
And not with the dimensions that I need. I can have them custom made.
Right.
But off the shelf, order them like out of LMC or any other, catalog. You can't find them. They're just not
so
there.
we took your old springs. You pulled a bunch of the pack out, right?
Pulled the pack
so
out.
Pulled a bunch of the overloads out and put it back on the rear because it had crazy overloads under there. It had a stack that was like 5 inches of
Oh
spring.
yeah. Gross weight of the truck, you could put 10,000 pounds on the truck and never hit the axle.
I'm pretty sure that truck would have hauled more wood than I could fit in my F-350.
Yeah. Problem was that when they built those stacks, and I'm pretty sure they built the spring pack and the overloads, because I think there was 10 springs in one pack and there were 6 springs in the overloads. That they actually used different size springs and actually cut them off with a torch to make them fit. So there you go. I mean, that's one thing that they did. So I threw that pack out and got the right pack and used the main leaf off the original pack for the springs that I bought for an F-100. So everything works with the exception that I won't have the carrying capacity in the back of the truck that F-250 did instead of using the F-100.
I mean, you're not going to be throwing giant work boxes back there. You're not going to be throwing a crane in the back.
No.
You're not going to turn it into a tow truck, which.
No. So going. What I could have hauled, 3,000 pounds in the back of the truck, now maybe 1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Which is fine with me because I'm really not going to use it for any more than that. I mean, it'll still be part of a work truck, but it's not going to be like a heavy duty, hauling massive amounts of steel or bricks or blocks or dirt or anything.
So it had a wood bed in it originally.
Yep.
But they had thrown a bunch of diamond plating in the bed.
Yeah, they threw a diamond plate in the top there because the bed was totally rotted out. So
they just covered it up.
Covered it up with a chunk of diamond plate, welded it to the sides of the bed, which took me forever to grind out and pull out. And then pulling out the old bed, which surprisingly enough, which is kind of unique for a truck that was in Montana, I figured it would be salt rusted. It's not. But after getting the cab sandblasted and finding just a couple of corners that rubbed it, I was very surprised at how
little rust there was.
Little rust and body rust was on the truck. I was amazed. Because it was,
when the frame
I
came
would have
back.
never thought about that.
Yeah, when the frame came back from sandblasting, and even when the cab and all the other parts came back from sandblasting, even I was really surprised at how a lot of what we were seeing was just surface rust.
Yeah.
And how clean the frame came out, so clean. I could not believe how good the frame looked after it got
looked factory.
sandblasted.
You did not find pits on it. You
Yeah.
didn't find rust pockets. You didn't find. It looked like a frame that came from the factory. It was that smooth.
Yeah.
And it was unreal. And that's the original truck frame.
Right.
Guaranteed.
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%. So everything came back from sandblast. You started putting the running gear and the everything. I think we hung the axles first on the frame. Started putting pretty much a rolling chassis, a rolling frame back together.
Rolling frame back together.
Yep. And then did you put it together first before shooting it with epoxy, or did you went ahead and shot the frame?
Yeah, I shot the frame with the epoxy. Then I redid the axles and I shot the frame or the axles with the epoxy. Redid all the brakes and the brake drums, so it's all new brakes, turned brake drums, all new brake cylinders. I'm gonna run all new brake lines. Did the front axle and replaced all of the bearings in the front axle because it's a closed knuckle axle. And I, in the process, once I get everything done, I'm going to reshim the kingpins because they're a little tight. That was another thing that the guys did when they had a problem with a bolt missing out of one of the kingpins. They just put a longer bolt in. Well, when they torqued it down, they put so much pressure on the bearing that the front end was hard to turn.
Right.
So now I got the shim kit that I'm going to reshim it, get it right, get it within the specs of the factory specs. So I did that, rebuilt the transmission, rebuilt the transfer case, cleaned up the engine.
Yeah, so it would it would pop out of second, and it wouldn't like going into third, right?
It would grind into third.
Right,
Yep.
but it would also pop out of second
Pop
gear.
out of second
if you were
gear.
going down the road, you weren't holding it into second gear, and you let go, that sucker would jump out.
Yeah.
So you knew you were going to rebuild the transmission. Weren't sure which gears were bad in it.
Right.
Opened it up, found out pretty much kind of what was going on with it, and you ordered a rebuild kit, which that was on back order for months.
Months. Yeah. That actually, who I ordered that from? Out of Utah.
It was Novak, wasn't it?
Yeah, Novak out of Utah.
Yeah, because I got the same.
Yeah.
I got a rebuild kit from them too. So.
Yeah, the bearing kit took 3 months.
Right.
And then I think it was the primary shaft that had the reverse gear and the first gear on it, if I remember right. Those were shot. They were, so much of the teeth were missing on the end. That's why it was grinding so much. Luckily enough, nobody had a new one that I could buy, but Novak actually had a used one that was in good shape that I bought. So I bought that, had it sent, rebuilt the transmission. Works great now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the reverse gear was tore up, and I think the second to third gear was ground up, and the synchronizer was shot.
Right.
So that's why I was having such a hard time going from second to third and then popping out of second gear. Transfer case was bulletproof. There was nothing wrong with the transfer case. It was perfect. So I just replaced all the bearings and seals, slapped it back together, filled it up with gear oil, and cleaned it up, painted it up, and it looks better than brand new now.
So you got the axles hung, you got the frame put back together, pretty much made it a rolling chassis again. You dropped the motor in it.
Yep.
So it's sitting there right now on this side of the shop with everything except the body on it.
Right.
And so after you spent all that time getting that done, it was time to start working on the body.
Yep.
And that's kind of where we've been the last couple months. This half of the shop has been dedicated to body work.
Yeah.
So.
Sanding, more sanding, pounding out dents, little dings. The good thing about doing the body work was it was the original paint. And when me and Sean brought it into the shop, after we got the engine put in, we looked at it and said, man, it's got some rust on it. So I got a gallon of just a black rust preventer paint. Sean brought in one of his buddies from work, and we taped it up, and he shot it just to keep the body from rusting anymore. So it was black.
Sealed it in.
Sealed it all in. So when I brought it in the shop and started tearing it down, because it only had that coat, another coat that probably somebody else painted on it, which was a green color.
It was weird.
Yeah, and then the original yellow from the Forest Service. So sanding it down was a snap. I mean, I blew through it and sanded it down pretty fast and everything else, so it worked out. In that, there's more dents and dings on this thing than I can count.
Oh yeah,
so.
it had been driven through the woods and not nicely.
So, you know, pounding on all these little dents and dings has been probably the longest part. I mean, and you'll see in some of the other subsequent videos where I cut out the rust and the cancer and filled it in with the body panel, welded it up, ground it down, filled it, and you know, so there'll be before and after, which is, you know, I'm pretty much amazed at how well I did.
Yeah, you replaced parts of the floor pan. You welded up holes in the firewall. Mm-hmm. You replaced the corners, the cab corners.
Two back corners on the cab.
Which pretty much is everywhere you'd expect mud, dirt, and water to sit that was going to rust. It had those spots.
Those were the spots.
But the cab and everything was, I mean, rust-wise, was in better condition than a lot of the later series trucks you find nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
Where, like, the doors weren't rotted out.
Nope.
You know? Nope. The doors were in great condition.
Yep.
You know, the
A-pillars were fine.
Yep.
The front of the cab was fine. Even underneath there was, the only bad part that was actually the worst in the truck was actually the driver's side.
Right.
It took the most abuse.
Usually on those trucks, from what I've seen.
Great.
Yeah, usually on those trucks, from what I've seen, usually the battery box will completely rot out. Mm-hmm. And that thing had a solid battery box.
Yep.
You know, because unlike, it doesn't sit under, with the motor on these trucks, it sits in the cab on the passenger side floor.
Yep. Under the floor.
Yeah, so it's like right where your feet are.
Yep.
So a lot of times, that's one thing I like about these trucks, is they have that big step when you get in. You know, they have that nice step to get into the truck. Yep. You know, when you open the door, and the battery box is right there. And so, you know, if you had muddy feet or whatever, all that shit's falling into the freaking, where the battery is.
Yep.
And those guys wouldn't clean that out. They'd rot out the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it was amazing how rust-free that thing actually was when it came down to it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, which is pretty amazing. Being a Montana truck, you'd figure, you know, with salt on the road and then doing everything, it would have been just a basket case, but no. Yeah.
So where you are now with the truck is pretty much to paint.
Yeah. So pretty much right now is I talked to a painter this morning, kind of making a deal with him on what to paint. What I'll do is I will actually take the cab and some of the other parts that I got primered. I'll do probably like a 200 grit sand on them to get them down. Then I'll shoot them again with another coat, just because some of the bodywork that I've done is bare metal, so I need to cover that up so it doesn't flash rust. I need to get that done. And then probably, maybe if things go right within the next 2 or 3 months, you know, the truck's going to get painted, and then it's going to be starting to put the body back on the frame and start assembling that. Yeah,
this truck would probably be a lot further along if it wasn't for the fact of what's going on in the world right now, that everybody's backed up. Like, you think with everybody home, you know, there were tons of projects that had been sitting in guys' garages that they hadn't worked on because they've been at work or whatever. Mm-hmm. And all that stuff, all those guys had nothing to do.
Oh, yeah.
Now you got, you know, paint shops and stuff that are months. They're booked out months. You know, so trying to find somebody.
They can't hire the painters. Right now, I talked to one shop that would take it today, but they just didn't have the laborers, you know, or the painters to do the work. They were screaming. They're going, we got more work than we got people for.
Exactly.
Which is kind of sad because, you know, but yeah. But the good thing is, in the meantime, while the body and everything is in for paint, I can finish up the rest of the things that I need to do on the frame, which is relocating the gas tank, which I welded up the spot from behind the seat. And so I took the gas tank from behind the seat, and I'm going to put it in the back of the bed in the frame, so that it's less of a fire hazard.
You're going to put a fuel cell between the frame rails, and pretty much be able to access from the back of the truck for that, instead of having the, you know, one behind the seat.
Behind the seat.
Right.
Yeah, it leaked all the time, smelled like gas. You could hear it sloshing around. Every time you turned the corner, you could hear the fuel sloshing. It was just annoying. It was not conducive for a truck. So that will actually be later down the road. I'll look at, filling that little panel in, making some kind of storage back there. Maybe doing some kind of shelving, maybe there's a, company has some type of stackable storage or something that I can put behind there. There's still a lot of things that I need to do to the truck to really get it to where I want it to be. One is I've already converted it to power brakes, so that was a job. The next is converting it to power steering, which has kind of been
it's been on the rocks.
A pain.
Yeah, that's on the rocks.
Yeah.
Because one thing we ran into when looking for dealing with power steering for that truck is finding all the right pieces to make it work. Yeah. And you can do it if you have some specific parts from certain years of 70s Fords.
Yeah.
But trying to find those, they're in super high demand. They sell out fast, or they're just not there.
Yeah, because you're up in, where we're at in our neck of the woods up here, there really isn't too many like pre-80s vehicles in salvage yards anymore. They just don't have them. They just get rid of them. Because there's not a demand for parts on them, they crush them, they get rid of them, and they're gone. Even there's a place in south of Washington that I went to that deals mostly in vintage vehicles. They had one truck, and it was a two-wheel drive, and it was a 68.
Yeah, so if you guys are up in the Pacific Northwest area, and you've seen this conversion done on like a 65 F-250 from the old worm gear style box to like a later series Signa box, and you know how this conversion works, with the different front axle and putting the Signa box in there and the power steering unit and all that, drop down a comment down below. I want to talk to some old timers that have seen this done before and throwing power steering in an old rig like this. I've seen conversion kits online that go for like, $1,000, or more. But then we're also still looking at the fact that this has a closed knuckle, axle in the front. It'd have to be swapped out to a different axle. So there's all that. If you guys have any information like that, I'd definitely be interested in talking to some people about that. So throw some comments down there if you've seen it done, or you know something. But, so, anything else you want to tell them about your project? Because I know we're to pretty much paint right now.
We're
on
paint.
The truck.
Yep. We're at body and paint and waiting for that to get done. And then, like I say, the rest is while that is in for paint, then the rest is on the frame, doing the fuel tank, the fuel lines, finishing up the brake lines, anything else that I need to readjust or check. Gonna go through on the final checks, make sure that there's fluids in the differential, transfer case, transmission. Change out the oil in the engine, get that done, so that's all complete, so that all my fluids are all done and I can have that checked off, so that when I'm putting the body on, that's not in the back of my mind that I need to do it. It's already been done. So
yeah, so when it gets done, it's literally just throw the body on the cab and throw the wiring in it.
Yep. I have to buy the wiring kit and rewire it. I'll have to figure out the power steering problem. Put another steering column in there, and then
that day when the cab goes back on and the wiring goes in.
Yep. And
that is the best part and my favorite part of putting a freaking vehicle together is when you get everything there and you're getting to that point, you still got some things to check off, but you're ready to turn that key and fire it back up.
That's what I can't wait to do.
As soon as you fire it up, stuff starts going at light speed. It's like, okay, well now I just need to get brake lights done. Let's get some fluid in it. It gets going down the road so fast after that. As soon as you get it fired back up.
Yeah, because I'm not even worried about doing the interior yet until I get this thing, the cab on and the bed on and the fenders on and the truck started.
Right.
Then I'll worry about the interior. I just want to hear it run again. It's been 2 long years, and
I know, right?
I'm ready to hear it fire up. So, but that's where we're at.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching the channel. I hope you enjoy seeing the progress on this truck. You know, I really love having my dad out here. He's in the shop all the time. I'm really lucky that I get to freaking hang out and watch him work on this project. You're definitely going to see a lot more of this on the channel. So, you know, when he gets a painter in here, when we start moving along with more of this project, all that's going to be videoed. You guys are going to get to see the process on that. Anyway, I want to thank you so very much for freaking watching the channel. Make sure to subscribe, like, and I'd love to hear more comments on what you guys want to see, how you liked the truck, you know, if you guys are excited to see more of the truck. Anyway, take care. I'll see you guys soon. See you later.